Hey Matt, today we're going to build a very simple desk for someone who is anything but simple, my son who has autism. If you want to hear more about his story, stick around to after the build process. I'll share that with you. We do have free build plans available for this project, link in the description below. However, if you would like to, and you have the means, we are asking for donations to the autism charity linked in the description in lieu of payment for the plan. So you get the plans for free. Don't feel obligated to donate, but if you do have the means and you want to, please consider it. It would mean the world to me. My other son wanted the desk that had all the bells and whistles, the lights, the pop-up chargers, all of that. This son wanted something very simple. And because he wanted something so simple and straightforward, I wanted to give him a custom piece that he could display on his desk, but it would mean something special to him. And we'll build that later in the video and I'll show you what we did. Let's build this thing. The first thing I needed to do was cut the plywood down to size, and I used my track saw, but you can certainly use a circular saw with a straight edge or your table saw. I just wanted to make sure the piece was nice and square since this was going to be our top. Also went ahead and cut some of this walnut for my edge banding. I wanted it to be at least a ½ inch thick, and then I took it to the table saw and cut it to size. For the walnut trim, I used a 45-degree miter cut to just make it look a little better, a little more finished. This piece was a little long, so I went back to the saw and trimmed it up. I just kept sneaking up on the cuts till I got the fit just right, or so I thought. Once I had the fit I wanted, I had all the pieces laid out. I used wood glue to attach them to the edge of the plywood. I use these band clamps from Tay Tools. These things are super nice. They're very grippy and they're nice and strong. They have a nice band on there that's integrated into the clamp that helps you clamp this edge banding on without having to use any type of fasteners. Just let those sit for an hour or so while the glue dries. I'll drop a link to all the tools and supplies used in this build in the description below. Now for the rest of the edge banding, I got very impatient, as I usually do. So I used some pin nails to attach the rest. It's a wee bit short. Cut another one. So this piece I cut when I cut everything else, and as you can see, after everything is fit on properly, it's just a tiny bit too short, and I don't want that gap there. I cut a new piece and snuck up on it. What I'll try to do is get this as flush to the top of the desk as possible, and then I'm taking a pin nailer and just tacking it on. The reason I'm using a pin nailer is you just can't see them. You can barely see them once everything is finished. If you wanted to use those clamps and let those stay on there, that'd be perfectly fine. It just takes a little longer for the glue to dry. Kind of have to wait, and I'm not very patient. It won't take many. I use this 1/8 inch roundover bit just to soften the edges of the desk so his arms doesn't get cut or doesn't get uncomfortable after long periods of use. You see, it's just a nice soft roundover. Before we build the frame of the desk, let me show you what I made for him to go on top of the desk, that custom special piece just for him. And I made it using today's sponsor, Carbide 3D, in the shape OCO 4XXL CNC. That's one of the greatest things I love about having the CNC in the shop is I'm able to make custom pieces for my friends, family, and customers. I used the shape OCO CNC to make this custom dice box. I actually got this file from Cut Rocket, which is a Carbide website, and it was free. I was able to download that and make this super cool box. I actually think he likes this storage box more than he likes the desk. One thing I love about Carbide is they actually have a website, my.carbide3d.com, where you can go and actually, before you get the CNC, start learning about how to operate the software, download the free software. They give you everything you need to learn about that. And when you do get the CNC in the shop, it comes with everything you need. The router, the dust collection, the work holding, everything. If you want to check out the full line of CNC's Carbide 3D offers, just go to carbide3d.com. I use an 1/8 inch roundover just to soften the top and bottom edges and 220 grit to sand the whole thing. You saw me cutting it out on the table saw, and that was where I was cutting the tabs out just to get a nice clean cut. Next, I took it over to the mineral oil bath and gave it a nice dousing with this, and that really makes that wood grain pop. Once I let the mineral oil dry, then I put these magnets in these pre-cut holes. That's going to make that lid stay on nice and tight. I also line the top lid with felt, and I use spray adhesive to hold that in. Then I finished the whole thing off with Outlaw's board butter for that added protection, and that lid fits perfect. But now he has a place to store his custom dice, and he can roll the dice in the lid of the box and not have any damage done to the top of his desk. Now it's time to start building the frame. And I'm just using a 2x6 here, and I'm gonna cut 2x2s out of that, just using the table saw. And this is all scrap wood. It's a great scrap wood project because all of this, the plywood and the 2x2s, were left over from previous projects. Once I had all the 2x2s cut out of the 2x6s, I took them over to the miter saw and cut them to length. Then I just started drilling pocket holes. I'm using my Maska M2 pocket hole jig here, the special gold edition. I like pocket hole joiner because it's strong, it lasts a long time, and it's easy and approachable for beginners. I drilled 2 pocket holes per end on all of the joints. Now it's time for the assembly. I use 2.5-inch pocket hole screws here. Use clamps to help hold everything in place while you drive the screws. That'll make your life much easier. I assembled the top apron all the way around first before moving on to the bottom. I did use wood glue at every joint to add stability. I assemble the long sides first and then the short sides. This makes it much easier for me. Next, for the lower aprons, it happens, don't worry about it. For the lower aprons, I attach those about 6 inches from the bottom of the feet. And then speaking of the feet, I use the same 1/8-inch roundover bit to round over the bottom of the feet. I sanded the top very, very lightly. Be careful you don't want to dig into that veneer. I also have this spongy sanding pad. It's kind of squishy. It prevents you from damaging the roundover you've previously made. Now I sanded the whole frame to 120 grit. Next thing to do is add pre-stain conditioner. You know, if you watch this channel, I believe in this stuff. It makes your stain come out more uniform and less blotchy, especially if you're staining pine. I just wipe a generous amount on the whole frame. Then it was time to stain. This stain was picked out by my son specifically because he wanted this color, and we just wipe that on, wipe it off, let it dry. For the top, I use a microfiber towel to wipe up any excess dust. You want to get all that loose dust off of there before applying the clear coat. For the clear coat, we're going to use Def Can Spray Lacquer. This stuff works really well, and it's really easy to use and very easy to get almost a flawless finish. You want to hold it about 6 or 8 inches off of the workpiece and spray a good coat. Let that dry about 30 minutes, and then use about a 2000 grit sandpaper or higher, and just kind of go over the rough edges. You'll be able to feel where the rough edges are, and this will help knock those down before applying the second coat. Use a microfiber towel when you're done to wipe up any dust that you've created, and then go back with another coat. The great thing about lacquer is it actually adheres to the next coat, so it's not like a layer on top of a layer, more so than it is a bonding type action. And I wound up putting about 5 coats of lacquer on here. Took me about 2 cans of this stuff, but it come out almost flawless, like it's super smooth to the touch, nice satin finish. Now to attach the frame to the top, just measure and center everything up, or if you want to, flush it up to the back if it's going up against the wall, however you want to attach that. I did pre-drill the holes to prevent any splitting, but the great thing about plywood is you don't have to worry about it expanding and contracting, so you can actually attach the frame with screws. Just be really careful not to drive the screws through your top. Look at that. That's a beautiful, simple desk made out of scrap wood. This is awesome. It's super strong. I weigh about 200 pounds, give or take a pound or two, and it holds me just fine. I actually built this desk out of scrap wood from projects I had left over, but if you went and bought the materials, you should be about $100 for the whole project because you're only gonna need a couple of 2x6s and a half sheet of plywood and some edge banding. That's it. My son is 20 years old, and when he was born, he couldn't be held. He refused to be held. Every time you picked him up and touched him and held him, he would scream to high heaven. We actually basically raised him from an infant to a toddler laying on a pillow, not being touched. We had no idea why he would refuse to let us hold him. He didn't want to be touched. And he was that way from the day he was born. And as a new parent, that's really hard. Like, it's really, really hard because you just want to hold them, you know? And it's just, whew, sawdust in my eyes in here. And so it's just difficult. And we had no idea what was going on. And so we actually didn't know that he had autism until he was in his teens. We had doctors tell us he had social anxiety and various other things. And it just kind of escaped everybody for whatever reason. When he was in middle school, he made this drawing and he said, this is how he felt at school. And man, did that punch me right in the gut. Because you can see he's isolated, the darkness around him. Like, it was a striking, very powerful drawing for a middle schooler. And it broke my wife and I's heart. It was tough. And it struck me so strong that I actually had a tattoo made and I put it here on my arm, because it just reminds me of everything that he struggles with. If you know anybody with autism, you know that they can get really overwhelmed very easily. And any change in their environment or change in their daily structure really, really does disrupt them. And so when he come and asked me for a desk, I was blown away. You know, I was like, are you sure you want a new desk? Because you can see here that what he had set up was basically just 2 pieces of wood on L brackets screwed to the wall. And he's had that for years, and that's just kind of what he's used. And so I wanted to give him exactly what he wanted. He actually brought me this drawing and said, this is what I want. This is how I want it to look. And he told me the materials, types to use, how he wanted it to feel, look, everything about it. So what my wife and I have learned about autism is he doesn't have a disability. He has a different ability. He sees things differently. He thinks about things differently, and it's really, really intriguing to see how he operates. He's quite high functioning. We've been extremely blessed in that aspect. He lives basically a normal life. He's able to go to college and do everything on his own. He does have his own struggles, but I'm so proud of him because he always pushes himself outside of his comfort zone. And he is one of the most intelligent people I have ever met. He loves history, and he can recite tons and tons and tons of historical information, and he retains all of it. It's absolutely fascinating to hear him talk about some of the stuff that I'm like, how do you remember this stuff? He can keep so much stuff in his mind and be able to recite it at a moment's notice. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm so proud of him, and I hope he loves this desk. If you like this video and you want to see a desk that has a lot more features, you can click that box right there. It's got a pop-up charger, undermount LEDs, trapdoor for your wires. It is sweet. Clicking that box, get you the big old virtual fist bump. Or a more simple desk with a drawer. I got one of those right there. You can click that box. Also, I built just a regular standard desk with nothing right there.